Our call to worship this morning comes from my colleague Manish Mishra Marzetti. Between rocking the boat and sitting down, between stirring things up and peaceably going along, we find ourselves here in community, each called from many different journeys, many different life paths, onto this river road. Some are here because the rocking of the boat has been too much tumult, too much uncertainty, too much pain. Some are here with questions about where the boat is going, how best to steer it, when will this journey end. Others are here as lovers of the journey, lovers of life itself, here in front, beside, behind, each a passenger, each a captain, doing the best we can. Rest here in your boat with me, the river calls. Listen to how I flow, the sound of life coursing all around you. Let the current hold you. Let the current guide you. The river that gently flows through your soul whispers, "Come, let us worship together." Our meditation this morning comes from Robert Walsh and is titled, "More Than We Deserve." I heard the second Brandenburg Concerto played in honor of Bach's 30th birthday, and I was swept away. I remembered a story about the people who send messages into outer space. Someone suggested sending a piece by Bach. The reply was, "But that would be bragging." Some say we get what we deserve in life, but I don't believe it. We certainly don't deserve Bach. What have I done to deserve the second Brandenburg Concerto? I have not been kind enough. I have not done enough justice. I have not loved my neighbor or myself sufficiently. But life is a gift we have not earned and for which we cannot pay. There is no necessity that there be a universe, no inevitability about a world moving toward life and then self-consciousness. There might have been nothing at all. Since we have not earned Bach or crocuses or lovers, the best we can do is to express our gratitude for the undeserved gifts and do our share in the work of creation. I was joking with some of you this week that I waited to preach this sermon until after my installation. So now you're all stuck with me. The title of the sermon today is Confessions of a Heretic. And I've hinted previously that you'll be hearing how and why I identify as a Unitarian, Universalist, atheist, and religious humanist. But with my personal theology, I'm also the minister of this amazing congregation. And we gather together with multiple views around our Unitarian, Universalist theology. So I want to be very clear at the outset that if you identify as Christian, deist, theist, believe in God, gods, or goddess, I hope that you hear that despite my sharing today of my own theological grounding within Unitarian Universalism, or perhaps because of it, that there is room for all in this congregation, and multiple theological perspectives are needed and honored and cherished. In many ways, this sermon is a continuation on the sermon that I did in the beginning of December called the G Word. And if you weren't here for that sermon, I invite you to go onto our website and listen to it. It was done in the beginning of December. In many ways, I've always felt a bit like a salmon swimming upstream in American society, living in a country where between 90 to 95% of Americans say that they believe in a God or supreme being of some kind. I sometimes wondered why I didn't believe. Growing up, it looked like life might be easier if I could believe in God. I even made the decision to attend a Christian seminary on my road to Unitarian Universalist ministry because I wanted to challenge myself and see what would happen to my theology in that context. And what happened was this. I gained more insight into the very many different and diverse concepts of God, but personally found that none of them spoke to me. Some form of belief in the various concepts of God has endured over the course of human history. There's an innate human tendency to see signs of agents and agency, minds like ours at work in the world. The need for the concept of God serves the purpose of helping people make sense of their world, and it can provide comfort in times of distress. In other words, the history of the concept of God evolves and changes in response to the roles that humans need God to play so that they can make sense and find meaning and coherence in human history and in human life. In his book, God Revised, UU minister Galen Gingrich claims that his God isn't supernatural, but yet he comes to the conclusion that belief in God is absolutely necessary. In other words, he argues that it's necessary to believe in God to enable us to interpret our experiences in the world and to account for its meaning. For him, God is this experience of connection, of past and future. Well, I differ in my approach, and as for me and some others, there is no need for a concept of God to feel this connection and to try to be able to make sense of the past, present, and future. But human language is faulty at best, and especially when we're trying to express nothing less than the mystery of the universe. It's quite possible that some people who say that they believe in God have a broad concept and call the connection God, whereas some people like me have the same concept of this connection but don't use that word. So let's first talk about atheism. Some claim that atheism is the evil twin of theism, and they advocate for the use of the word non-theist. But I've always been a bit of a rebel, and so I prefer to take the name atheist, one that's not popular in our culture, and our culture might see as a negative, and claim it as my own, much like William Ellery Channing claimed the unpopular title Unitarian for himself and like-minded religious liberals nearly 2 centuries ago. Because atheists are not generally well thought of in our culture, jokes about atheists abound. So here's one of my favorites. You got an atheist telling an atheist joke. So there's an atheist walking through the woods one day, enjoying the beauty of nature, and all of a sudden he hears a rustling in the bushes behind him and turns around to see this huge bear. And the bear starts running after him, and the atheist starts running and running, turns around, bear's still behind him, and then he trips and he falls. And he turns, he rolls over and sees the bear poised above him, paw in the air, and without even thinking, this atheist yells out, "Oh my God!" I haven't even gotten to the punchline yet. Time stopped. Everything froze. The bear and his paw were standing there, and this bright light came down from heaven, and a voice said, "You deny my existence all these years, teach others I don't exist, and even credit our creation to a cosmic accident? Do you expect me to help you out of this predicament? Am I to count you as a believer?" Well, the atheist looked directly into the light and said, "You know, it would be hypocritical for me to ask for you to turn me into a believer right now, but perhaps you could make the bear a believer." "Very well," the voice said. The light went out and the sounds of the forest resumed. And the man waited for a second, and the bear dropped his paw, and the man said, "Oh, thank goodness." And the bear put his paws together and said, "Thank you, Lord, for this food I'm about to receive." Had to do it, sorry. Being an atheist simply means that I do not believe in a God. But as an atheist, without a belief in a concept of God, I move in this world with what Albert Schweitzer called a reverence for life. This reverence includes a sense of the holiness and sacredness of life. I see the world and all that moves in it as a place of great beauty and also a place of great pain. The beauty is a wonder, a grace, a joy, and the pain is a lack of connection, a lack of community. It's part of our experience as living beings on this generous, giving, fragile, hurting earth. It is a call to respond when the holiness and sacredness of life is violated. I personally do not need a concept of God to feel this connection. Although I am open to the concept that there may be a spirit or energy or force that is inherent in all beings, both animate and inanimate, and in the earth itself. But I don't understand this force to be God or any supernatural entity. Rather, this is our common origin and fate that connects all life and the world we know and beyond. This sense of connection in all carries a commitment to the welfare of others and to the earth. When one lives with the theology that there is this spark of connection in all things and all people, the world is seen in a holistic way, and choices are made which take into account this interconnectedness. This is the concept of the Golden Rule, also found in major world religions. It says that any harm done is harm done to oneself. Everything is connected. But my understanding moves beyond the Golden Rule. So instead of treat others as you would be treated, what if we sought to live by the Platinum Rule that says, treat others the way they want to be treated? In this understanding, there's an empathy and compassion that includes the diversity of life. So this is the atheist part of my identity. No God, but belief in the interconnected web of life. For the humanist part of my theological stance, here's an interesting bit of history of humanism in the United States. It was actually 3 Unitarian ministers in the early part of the 20th century that gave birth to the ideology of American humanism and were instrumental in the creation of the first Humanist Manifesto in 1933. These 3 Unitarian ministers also gathered around them supporters, and together they were the founders of the American Humanist Association in 1941. So there is a very strong intersection between Unitarian Universalism and humanism. The third Humanist Manifesto says, the life stance of humanism, guided by reason, inspired by compassion, and informed by experience, encourages us to live life well and fully. And to that I say, yes. However, for me, humanism alone is not enough. It doesn't speak to or satisfy me as a whole human being. It lives in the head and assumes that human beings are autonomous, individualistic, and rational beings who reason our way to virtue. Now, don't get me wrong, I like to think that I'm as autonomous and individualistic and rational as the next person, but the last half century of cognitive scientific research has shown that such autonomous and rational beings don't really exist. We're not totally rational animals. Is that a newsflash for anyone? Emotions and feelings play a central role in our decision-making, and the vast majority of thought is actually not conscious, and our minds are riddled with biases. I need, and I think others need, what Unitarian Universalism has to offer, a place to come together in community that is a safe haven, which supports and encourages us to find our truths and translate our beliefs into action. We are free-thinking mystics with hands. In other words, we use our brains and our freedom of choice, and we speak to the spirit and emotions, and we exalt the passions in pursuit of common moral action. In last month's President's column of the Humanist Society of Santa Barbara's Secular Circular, say that 3 times, Colin Gordon expressed this same idea when he wrote, "I have an uncomfortable feeling that I'm missing something. Although religion cannot explain the physical world and many scientific phenomena, humanism in turn seems to be lacking something. Emotions, for example, happy, sad, joyful, despondent, have a meaning of their own that is not included in our humanist manifesto. We could perhaps explain them as some complex exchange of electrical impulses in the brain, but there is surely more to it than that." And he continues, "As the new year 2015 begins, we feel hope, anticipation, apprehension perhaps, and no mathematical formula can describe or evaluate these feelings. Something is missing. I've got the answer," and he said, "spirituality." Well, I have never met Colin Gordon, although I'm sure many people in this room have, but my response to him is, welcome to Unitarian Universalism. Greg Epstein, the humanist chaplain of Harvard University, also acknowledges this lack in his book, Good Without God. He writes, "We are human and we need to do experiential things, the heart that religion provides, some form of ritual and culture and community. The singing that we do every Sunday and that we talked about earlier in the message for all ages is an example of how we engage the head and the heart." In 1821, Friedrich Schleiermacher claimed that the essence of Christian piety is the feeling of absolute dependence on God. Now, in that sentence, the important word is feeling. This was groundbreaking because at the time, the essence of religion was obedience to commandments or assent to orthodox doctrine. And Schleiermacher said that religion is an experience, a feeling, heart, and spirit. And our liberal tradition flows directly from this declaration of religion as the experience of being connected to everything that exists in a way that both validates our place in the universe and yet reminds us that we are ultimately small and temporary creatures. In fact, the very word religion comes from the Latin religare, which means to bind, to connect, to join. Now, I readily acknowledge that there are things that I cannot explain, at least as of yet, through the use of scientific rationalism that I enjoy so much. Mystical experiences, déjà vu, synchronicities, prescient dreams. One of my first memories of this kind of experience was my mother telling me when she was a young child, she had a dream of her uncle's death and of his funeral. And so she went to her mother and told her what she had dreamed in great detail. And of course, nobody believed her. And 2 months later, her uncle passed away. And indeed, the funeral was exactly as my mom had described in her dream. I have no problem acknowledging that there are things that we do not understand, but I am not comfortable personally in turning to a supernatural explanation of such events and experiences. In their time, Emerson and the Transcendentalists explored the occult and paranormal, all in the understanding that this could lead to greater human freedom. What if mystical experiences, things we can't explain, are really not something beyond humanity, but are simply glimpses of the potentialities of what we might yet become? So although the label of atheist and religious humanist speak to the fact that I do not believe in God as commonly understood, I do believe in the greater encompassing power of love and wonder and mystery and grace, and in engaging with life and building a better world and happiness, and in the interconnectedness of life and of being of service. I believe in life before death. We cannot know what happens to us when we die, and my believing in life before death calls me to do what I can in the here and now to help heal our world. Because although we need a theological or philosophical life stance through which we interpret our experiences in the world and account for their meaning, identifying as a theist or atheist or humanist or whatever flavor you claim will only take you so far. It is far more important how your belief or life stance compels you to move in the world, what actions you take to live out your beliefs, that is ultimately of the great importance. We live in a time where the words and visions for our common and interdependent fates have fractured. We no longer have the ability, it seems, to respond imaginatively to crises because we've bought into this fragmented, micro-individualistic model and concept, and our sense of public good and connectedness of common purpose has been weakened. Just witness our U.S. Congress if you need an example. It is only through working together with others toward common cause in tikkun olam, the repair of our world, that we build the trust and understanding and break down the barriers that exclusivist doctrines have erected. Faith, defined very broadly, whether in a particular religious system or an ethical system, should be expressed by the way we live our lives, and sometimes getting caught up in the backstory of the theology is just background noise. Faith in God is not the only source for moral and ethical action, and the hope for the future of our planet may hinge on the question of whether or not we as human beings can cross the borders that divide us and open our arms to those labeled others. We live in a culture where increasing numbers of people are concerned with spiritual questions of meaning and purpose and the healing of hurt, but they have decreasing confidence in the institutions that have traditionally delivered answers to those questions. I stand here today to say that if this sounds like you, welcome to the spiritual religion of Unitarian Universalism, the first and, to my knowledge, the only open source religion. Here we work together on our spiritual life in a community of free-thinking mystics with hands. There's something absolutely vital about people on a spiritual path coming together in community regularly to listen, to pause, to sit in silence, to laugh, to sing, to think deeply, to learn from one another, to minister to one another in the joys and sorrows of life. We are an open spiritual community. We need each other. It's all about life before death. And so living as a Unitarian Universalist, an atheist, and a religious humanist, I embrace the world with hope and love and patience and faith and humor, always a lot of humor. There is a deep richness and joy and peace in my UU atheist humanist soul. I treasure this religion which welcomes all to journey together as they travel on their spiritual paths. I welcome you on this journey with me, regardless of whatever theological label we attach to ourselves, as we work together in common cause toward a deeper understanding, toward a healed earth, and toward a world of open arms and no fear. Blessed be, and amen. Connect with your neighbor in whatever way is comfortable. Our faith, this congregation, is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. Let us pause in silent witness to that unity. And dear ones, as you go forth in your week ahead, may the blessings of love be upon you, may love's peace abide with you, and may love's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. So be it. Amen, and blessed be. And now our service truly begins. We extinguish the flame of our communal chalice as the congregation responds.